Margaret had no children of her own. So when 18-year-old Danny knocked on her door, soaked from the rain with nowhere to go, she didn't hesitate. She gave him everything: her home, her love, her trust. 23 years later, he sold her house from under her. But here's what Danny didn't know. Margaret had been playing chess while he was playing checkers. And when that courtroom door opened, the game was already over. Picture this: 1998. Margaret Williams, 62 years old, living alone in a 3-bedroom Victorian house in Portland. Her husband died 5 years earlier. No kids, just her garden, and too many empty rooms. Then came Danny Morrison, 18, homeless. Parents kicked him out for dropping out of college. Most people would have called the police. Margaret made him soup. "You can stay until you get on your feet," she told him that first night. 23 years. That's how long "until you get on your feet" lasted. Margaret didn't just give Danny a roof. She gave him a family, drove him to job interviews, celebrated his promotions. When he got married, she walked him down the aisle. When his kids were born, she became Grandma Margaret. She never asked for rent, never asked for anything. But time has a way of changing people. And by 2021, Danny wasn't the grateful kid who showed up at her door. He was a successful contractor with his own business, 2 kids in private school, a wife who liked expensive things, and suddenly Margaret's house looked less like home and more like an opportunity. It started small. Comments about the house being too big for Margaret. Suggestions about downsizing, how she was getting older and needed help managing things. Margaret was 85, but sharp as ever. She saw what was happening. "I think you should sign the house over to me," Danny said one Tuesday morning over coffee. "You know, for estate planning, tax purposes. I'll take care of everything." Margaret's hands trembled as she set down her cup. Not from age, from betrayal. But she signed the papers because when someone raises you like their own son, you trust them with everything. 3 months later, Margaret woke up to a "for sale" sign in her front yard. Danny had sold her house to developers for $1.2 million without telling her. "Don't worry," he said when she confronted him, barely looking up from his phone. "I found you a nice little apartment. 1 bedroom. Perfect for someone your age." Someone her age? This from the boy she tucked in when he had nightmares. The man she'd loved like family for over 2 decades. Margaret packed her things in silence, moved into a cramped apartment across town. No garden, no memories, just 4 walls and the sound of her own heartbeat, wondering how she'd been so wrong about someone. But here's what Danny didn't see coming. Margaret wasn't just heartbroken. She was angry. And Margaret angry was something Danny had never encountered before. 3 weeks after Margaret moved out, she made a phone call to her lawyer, the same lawyer who'd handled her husband's estate, the same lawyer Danny thought was too old and out of touch. "Harold," she said, "I need you to review some documents, carefully." What Danny didn't know, what he never bothered to learn in 23 years of living in that house, was that Margaret's late husband had been a real estate attorney. Smart, meticulous, paranoid about property law. When Margaret inherited the house, Harold had helped her set up a very specific trust, one that protected the property from exactly what Danny had just done. The house couldn't be sold without the trustee's approval. And Margaret? She was the trustee. Every signature Danny had gotten from her was legally meaningless. Every document he'd filed was invalid. The sale to the developers? Completely void. But Margaret didn't stop there. 23 years of treating someone like family creates a paper trail, phone records, texts, emails, all of it showing Danny's gradual shift from grateful son to calculating opportunist. And then there were the improvements. Every renovation Danny had done to help Margaret maintain the house, $200,000 worth over the years, had been paid for with Margaret's money. Money she'd freely given, thinking she was helping family. But legally? Legally, it was theft. Margaret spent 3 months building her case. Every receipt, every bank statement, every promise Danny had broken, documented and dated. She wasn't just taking her house back. She was taking everything. The courtroom was packed the morning of the hearing. Danny walked in confident, his expensive lawyer beside him. He'd already spent $400,000 of the house money on a new truck and his kids' tuition. This was just a formality. Then Margaret walked in, not the frail old woman he'd manipulated. This was Margaret with steel in her spine and Harold, the out-of-touch lawyer, carrying a briefcase thick with evidence. The judge reviewed the case for exactly 12 minutes. "Mr. Morrison," she said, looking at Danny over her glasses, "you don't own this house. You never owned this house. You forged documents to steal this house. And now you're going to give back every penny." Danny's face went white. His lawyer started shuffling papers frantically. But the judge wasn't done. "Furthermore, you're being charged with elder abuse, fraud, and theft. The state is seizing your assets to compensate Mrs. Williams for her legal fees and emotional distress." The truck? Gone. The private school tuition? Danny's problem now. His business accounts? Frozen until he could prove the money wasn't stolen. But here's the part that really shook that courtroom. Margaret stood up, looked at Danny, this man she'd raised, loved, sacrificed for, and said 6 words that cut deeper than any legal judgment. "I'm not angry, I'm disappointed." Danny broke down, right there in court, sobbing like the 18-year-old kid who'd shown up at her door all those years ago. But this time, Margaret didn't make him soup. She walked away. Margaret moved back into her house 2 weeks later. The developers got their money back. Danny lost everything. His business, his house, his reputation in a community where everyone knew what he'd done. As for Margaret, she started volunteering at a homeless shelter, helping people who genuinely needed it, people who remembered what gratitude meant. The last I heard, Danny was working construction for someone else's company, living in a rental. His wife left him when the money ran out. His kids, well, they learned a valuable lesson about what happens when you betray the people who love you. Margaret still lives in that Victorian house, still tends her garden, still has too many empty rooms, but she's never lonely. Because karma is the best company you can keep. Some people think revenge is about getting even, but real karma isn't about punishment. It's about justice. It's about the universe reminding us that actions have consequences, and love isn't something you can sell for $1.2 million. Margaret didn't just win her house back. She won something more valuable, the knowledge that she'd raised Danny right, and his choices after that were his alone to make. What would you have done if it were you? If you believe in karma too, subscribe and we'll see you in the next story.